Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is a cold freaking day. It's about 4 or 5 degrees. It's a Friday. It's about 11:30. Hope everyone's doing good. It's pretty funny. Every morning I kind of do my daily little ritual thing, like we all are. We're all akin to that kind of thing sometimes, or for the most part, where we have like our little habits. But typically, I'm definitely a person that is really good with having like a routine. If I don't have a routine, I get distracted too easily, and then I don't really maintain focus on the work that I need to do and all those kinds of things. But the more and more I have a routine, the better. And typically every morning during the winter, I'll go and get up in the morning, have some coffee, and then I usually do a movie show every day, and then while I'm usually filming, I'll usually turn the heat on in my music space. I have a separate little building on my property. It used to be in my basement of my house, but I have this separate little building on my property that I use for rehearsals, and it's a practice space. I have a PA, but I when I do my regular practice, it's in there. But I have a little heater in there, and I usually turn the heater on and let it go for a while. And it usually takes, when it's in the 20s or 30s, it usually takes like an hour and a half or so for it to get it kind of comfortable. And then I'll go in there after I'm done doing video stuff, or if I've had to do like, some music stuff where I'm like booking, trying to work on booking some shows or promotional stuff, which sometimes that takes up a lot of time. I'll I'll when I'm done with that, I'll go in there and practice. But today, because we're getting this pretty insane cold snap, and then today I looked uh, at the temperature and I was like, wait, it's like 5 degrees, and I'm like, it's gonna take 2.5 hours before it's even comfortable in there. And I was just like, and I'm having to do some other things, so I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna just probably hang inside and get some work done inside. So I literally like opened up the door and I looked at the temperature and I was just like, nope, not doing that. And then tomorrow it's supposed to be even colder, so kind of stinks, but it is what it is. And then it's gonna get warm again by Sunday or warmer. But today's show is The Howl of the Devil. This came out in 1988, and this was written and directed by Paul Naschy. Paul Naschy is a Spanish actor, director, writer. He was also involved with practical effects, who in the exploitation underground world is kind of a legend. He's most well known for all of his roles that he made, pretty popular, especially in the exploitation world, around playing the werewolf. This was the first film, and again, I just discovered him about like 3 years ago or less. I This was the first movie I saw him in. I did a show on, probably, there's a lot of his films I haven't seen before, but I have been watching a good amount of his films. One of the things I've discovered is just how incredibly prolific he was. He passed away a few years ago, actually, but he was incredibly busy in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, decade after decade, he was such a prolific actor. But I did a show a few weeks back on The Beast and the Magic Sword, which is one of, I think, probably his, from what I've seen, and generally from what I've heard from people who love the exploitation stuff, that this is, you know, his best his best role, and I definitely think it's his best movie that I've seen so far, and it's an incredible ride. It's got this whole like original concept of where he plays the Wolfman, but it's also set during the time of feudal Japan. So you have your horror elements in the, around the werewolf lore and the werewolf aesthetics, but it's also combined with like martial arts and samurais, and there's all these incredible sword fights. So there's all of this, there's like all of these like mystical elements combined with horror, and it's just incredible. and basically the whole centerpiece of this film is Paul Naschy plays this character who gets turned into a werewolf, and in order he's trying all these different things to try to you know basically break free of this curse. He travels to feudal Japan and tries to indoctrinate himself into all of these variations of Japanese discipline to try to free himself. And it's the movie. It's so epic and so incredible. It's so original. I've never seen martial arts and horror combined like that before. And the fight choreography is just incredible. The horror elements are great. He's incredible as the Wolfman in it. Just an amazing film. The other fantastic aspect of it is I've talked a lot about all of these fabulous labels that have been putting out all of these exploitation movies, and just there's an amazing assortment. There's Severin, which is technically probably the best company out there that just gives you uh, truly a big bang for your buck as far as they load all of their movies with just these incredible amounts of special features. From a technical side, the movies they just look gorgeous. They're from their direct transfer from the actual film to this digital format. They're probably the best overall, just for that reason. They tend to be a little bit more expensive that way, but it's pretty justified. Blue Underground's another one, but I've been really diving into buying Mono Macabre. Their movies are really on the cheap side. Like it's very rare that I pay $20 or more um, for any of their films, and they have an amazing thing. They really, I think, specialize in just taking super deep dives in the world of exploitation, and they focus on so much diversity within the spectrum of films that they put out. They always come with great special features. I just did a movie that was called. I just did a show on The Laughing Woman, which was my last movie that I bought from Mono Macabre, and just I was completely blown away by that movie. And that movie is just this is completely insane. It's like this psychedelic mind trip of a movie, and the whole kind of essence of the movie is about psychosexuality. But Mono Macabre's labels all over the place. Like everything is focused on these really underground, super underground films. But there's horror. There's like giallo films. There's like sex exploitation. Just wild. A lot of disturbing films, but really really underground. And so when I bought this movie a few years ago, I was I had acquired a few movies from Mono Macabre, which I really loved, but this looked fantastic, and it's called Howl of the Devil, and this is how I discovered Paul Naschy. Like again, he like I said, a really famous, iconic figure in the world of exploitation, an actor, director. He was a writer. He worked on the effects on lots of films. He was also involved with the effects areas, and this was one of his debuts. I believe he directed a few films in his career, and this is a later film. I mean, he was really prolific in the '60s, '70s, '80s, and also the '90s. Like it's crazy, especially in the '70s and '80s. It's like unbelievable the amount of movies he put out and that he was involved in. So prolific. Lots of his films I haven't seen, but I have seen a pretty good amount of them. But we're talking in the range of like 80 to 100 films, and it's staggering how prolific he was. From what I've read, he was involved with like sometimes two movies a year that would come out. I mean, just amazing. And he was most well known for as an actor, but also portraying the Wolfman in many many movies. And there's lots of great interviews. There's really a great special features package with this movie itself. But he talks extensively about as a kid, and even to where he became an adult and got involved with the exploitation world. He was enamored and obsessed with all the classic monsters from Universal, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Invisible Man, and his main love and his passion was the Wolfman. And his favorite actor of all time was Lon Chaney Jr. And Lon Chaney Jr. played the Wolfman. That gave birth to the Wolfman or the werewolf genre, basically. And so he really modeled that character that Lon Chaney first brought to life for his movies, but he took it and did something new and different, and with in a more seedier way, a little bit more of a nastier way with a more low budget, and putting it in the context or putting that character in a like exploitation world. And there's something like 15 to 20 movies I believe he was involved in with where he played the Wolfman. Probably the best movie I've seen of him so far, and there's a lot of his films I haven't seen yet, but I've seen quite a few, and I'm slowly buying more and more of his films. He's one of those actors that if I see him in anything, I'll probably buy it, because even if the movie's probably not very good, he is so awesome. He's just got this great presence on screen, and I think he's a really good actor. I think he was legitimately a real talented actor, but he's really passionate. And he's most well known for playing the role of the werewolf, but he was always in other forms of movies, other genres or styles in the exploitation world. Like sex exploitation, giallo films, action movies, supernatural based horror films, slasher films. But he was most well known for playing the Wolfman. And out of the movies I've seen, the Beast and the Magic Sword, which I did a show on maybe a month or two ago for this channel, is probably my favorite. I mean, that movie is just bonkers crazy. It's so unique. It's so original, and yeah, it's a wild ride. So this was the first movie I ever saw with him in it, and this was I believe it was his directorial debut. And this movie is crazy because it's literally, again, it comes with all of these great special features, as do all of the Mondo Macabro movies. But there's two interviews with Paul Naschy that are like almost 2 hours long each, and he goes, talks all about his career and all of his, all the things he was involved in, and future projects that he was working on, and because he shot this. He passed away, I think, about 10 years ago, but he was prolific right up until he passed away. Just amazing, the body of work that he put out. And, but he talked about the whole, like, focus on this, well, particularly around this movie. And in these documentaries, the focus of it is talking about the Howl of the Devil. And he felt that this movie was essentially his love letter to all things horror. Paul Naschy was also known for playing multiple characters in movies, and this movie is like a real big example of that. He plays the Frankenstein monster. He plays Dracula. He plays the Wolfman. He plays the Mummy, and it's a real interesting movie. It's a slasher movie. It's a supernatural occult kind of movie, but it also it combines both of those kinds of elements, like a supernatural, occult kind of vibe. But then it's definitely a slasher movie. It's got a sex exploitation vibe to it too. But essentially, he talks about it a lot in these interviews, where this movie was a love letter to all things Universal, and how these movies and those iconic monsters really, shaped his whole view and his whole world view, and also his career, and gave him, this inspiration to start a career in horror films. And it's great. I mean, it's an incredible movie. It's really weird. It's really disturbing. There's a couple of scenes in it which I can't probably really say, that are incredibly gut-wrenchingly just disturbing, and just like I almost have to look away And I have a pretty high threshold for violence, but there's a few scenes in it that are, particularly around the slasher element of this film, that are just so messed up and disturbing. And again, this movie is so unique because it is a love letter to the Universal monsters, but again, it's done in a very unique way because it has this occult aspect to the movie, supernatural, like with a supernatural kind of twist, and it's also a slasher film. It's beautifully shot, and the other thing that's so commendable is that Paul Naschy, directed this movie, but he plays like 5 or 6 different roles in it. And so this was a really cool introduction to his career for me. And this was like done. This came out in '88, so it was like a little bit. I mean, he was older and had all this experience, but and he was looking at this as like a reflective movie of his whole kind of like his legacy. Just incredible. And the list of films that he was involved in is just was just staggering, just amazing. Um, like I said before, I've probably seen maybe 5 to 10 of his movies, but the list is huge. I mean, you're talking 80 to 100, maybe even more films. Um, Films like The Werewolf versus the Vampire, um, Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, um, was another film of his. Just an endless amount of movies. The Fury of the Wolfman, Inquisition was another one. Panic Beats was another movie. Human Beast, he did a version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Um, Rottweiler, um, School Killer, The Apostle, Seven Murders, Crimson, just Dracula versus Frankenstein. Um, just yeah, just an amazing, staggering amount of films he was involved in. Assignment Terror, Hunchman, Hunchback of the Notre Dame, Count Dracula's Great Love, um, Night of the Howling Beast, Curse of the Devil. Um, yeah, just insane. And this is like kind of only scratching the surface of the amount of movies that he did as an actor. And yeah, so I've been really proactively looking to buy as many of his films as I can. And it's again it's like the epitome of exploitation. It's super trashy. It's super bizarre. It's got some scenes in it that are generally hard to watch, but at the same time, like I said, it's like a love letter to all things Universal. Just a tremendous movie, and I feel like for me it was like a really great introduction to Paul Naschy as an actor and as a this iconic figure in the world of exploitation. I really think like my favorite of his work is definitely The Beast and the Magic Sword so far, and I've seen quite a few others. But amazing, amazing movie. If you're into horror, particularly around the werewolf genre, the werewolf genre is probably my favorite as far as I guess you could say monster movies. I'm a huge vampire genre fan. Count Dracula, all of the incarnations of Count Dracula from especially like the Hammer films starring Christopher Lee, and of course Gary Oldman, Frank Langella, which I think is a great representation of Dracula or incarnation of Dracula. And there's so many great vampire movies, Near Dark, The Lost Boys, From Dusk Till Dawn. with werewolf movies, there's also a lot of great films that were made, but I feel like there's, nowhere's near the amount compared to the vampire genre. The vampire genre is probably the biggest monster genre in the world. But some of my favorite werewolf movies are probably my favorite of all time is The Howling. There's also Silver Bullet is it's really great. Of course, American Werewolf in London. There's all like the great Hammer films that came out. Um, there's there's quite a few, but it's pretty pale in comparison when you look at how many werewolf movies there are. The Beast and the Magic Sword is also one of my favorites. That's an incredible movie. It's one of them. It's so stunningly original, similar to, even though it's a different kind of thing, but similar to as far as just how original it is. American Werewolf in London, where it combines lots of different elements. Uh, and I think the reason I've always gravitated more so to werewolf movies is just because I feel like that monster is maybe a little bit closer related to aspects of the human condition. With the idea of us being essentially these animals, and we have these instincts, and there are uh, all facets to our personality and capable of great things, and then also the very horrible things. And so I've always been attracted to that psychology around werewolf lore, and also, the human animal, and another direct lineage of that is lycanthropy, which is an actual disease where people can show the traits of what has become or what is a part of the werewolf lore. So, just an amazing. I've always felt there's always that really amazing connection with that, and it's got this real primal draw to that. So I've always felt like werewolf movies are kind of where I'm at. But Paul Naschy kind of did something really unique, really different in the exploitation world. And again, for me, I think this was like kind of the best way to kind of discover his work. And it could be the same for you if you've never discovered or heard of Paul Naschy. I mean, again, there's like 80 to 100 movies, maybe more, that he was involved in. Most notably, working in the werewolf genres, where he was probably most well known for. But he worked in many genres: giallo, sex exploitation, um, just all kinds of great films, all in the exploitation world. But he's probably most well known as playing the werewolf. And he talks extensively about his love for the classic werewolf that was introduced to the world by Lon Chaney Jr., and how he really modeled his rendition off of Lon Chaney Jr. Even down to the makeup, with the aesthetics around building the character. Uh, and you really see that. But he did something very, very different. He, brought this character of the werewolf and put him in these, really interesting and kind of bizarre situations. And it also put in the more, definitely in the exploitation world. But the prosthetics, the makeup, all those things he took from Lon Chaney Jr. And this film really is a love letter to the universal, the group of monsters that, basically changed the world of horror forever. So I highly recommend this movie. And I think too, anything you can see with that you come across that has has Paul Naschy's name attached to it, for the most part, I think it would be a great movie. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for checking out this channel. If you like this crazy stuff that I do, please like and subscribe to it, and we will see you next time. Peace.